watching Now 24 Nightly News with me, Mariam Zian, to the headlines. The humanitarian tragedy is worsening in the Gaza Strip. Extreme cold claims the life of another infant, while Israeli forces continue launching airstrikes on various areas of the enclave. In a joint statement by the United Nations and more than 200 humanitarian organizations warn of a possible collapse of humanitarian operations. In Sudan, the United Nations documents the killing of 1,000 civilians by the Rapid Support Forces at a displacement camp in Al-Fasher. The army says it has repelled several RSF attacks in the north of the country, and Sudanese organizations say RSF assaults are paralyzing vital civilian institutions. Algeria calls for reforming the United Nations counterterrorism system, confirms the establishment of principles to prevent terrorist financing through modern technologies, and urges increased resources for counterterrorism efforts in Africa. And regarding the war in Ukraine, President Zelensky stresses at the EU summit that no peace document has been agreed on so far. Washington announces plans to hold talks with Russia in Miami later this week. The European Commission expects an agreement on financing Kiev at the Brussels summit. Hello there and welcome back to the details of your nightly news. First, in our file, a Palestinian infant was martyred on Thursday as a result of extreme cold in the Mawasi area of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza Strip. Local media sources told the official Palestinian news agency Wafa that 1 month-old infant, identified as Basaid Abidin, died due to severe cold and the lack of heating. The sources added that the death toll in Gaza caused by the cold wave and harsh winter conditions has risen to 13, highlighting the grave deterioration of the humanitarian situation in the Strip, particularly for children and displaced people living in dilapidated tents, unfit to withstand winter conditions. The Palestinian was killed by Israeli occupation forces gunfire on Thursday in the city of Khan Yunis, southern Gaza Strip. According to the Palestinian news agency, Israeli forces opened live fire at a group of Palestinians east of Khan Yunis, killing one civilian. And at least 11 people were injured on Thursday in a new Israeli airstrike targeting several areas in central and southern Gaza. Gaza Civil Defense spokesperson Mahmoud Basal said Israeli forces continue their bombardment and targeting of civilians in violation of the ceasefire agreement, calling on the international community to put an end to the ongoing aggression against Gaza.
There is a large number of shrapnel here, which remained in the area of the explosion perpetrated by Israeli forces in the region of Al-Samaj inside Gaza City, leaving 4 injuries. We still say that violations continue in Gaza, and the Israeli occupier continues its bombardments and its targeting of civilians, and we are still calling on the whole world to face up to what is currently going on in the Gaza Strip.
And Hamas leader Ghazi Hamad said Israel committed clear violations of the ceasefire in Gaza over the past 24 hours, accusing it of manipulating the agreement. He said the violations reflect a lack of seriousness in implementation and warned that delaying tactics are worsening the humanitarian situation and threatening the collapse of the truce, calling for Israel to fully comply with the agreement. The United Nations and hundreds of aid organizations have warned that humanitarian operations in the Palestinian territories, particularly in the Gaza Strip, are at risk of collapse unless Israeli authorities remove existing obstacles. In a joint statement issued Thursday by the UN and more than 200 Palestinian and international aid organizations, it was noted that dozens of international humanitarian organizations, they do face deregistration by December 31, a move that would have catastrophic consequences for the provision of essential services in Gaza.
Dozens of international relief organizations risk having their registration revoked by December 31st, forcing them to halt operations within 60 days. This would have catastrophic impact on access to essential life-saving services in Gaza. The United Nations cannot fill the gap left by the collapse of international NGOs, and alternative actors outside established humanitarian principles cannot replace them. Humanitarian aid is not optional or political and must reach Palestinians without delay. Due to the occupation's violation of the ceasefire agreement, the number of aid trucks entering Gaza remains below agreed levels.
The Lebanese National News Agency reported that Israeli warplanes carried out a series of airstrikes on Thursday targeting various areas in southern and eastern Lebanon. The strikes hit the Ijbur, Katrani and Rihan Heights, Wadi al-Qasir in the town of Dir Tiryan and the outskirts of Al-Taiba in southern Lebanon, in addition to targeting the Budai Heights and the Hermel area in the eastern Beqa' Valley. And in Sudan, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights announced that more than 1,000 civilians were killed in an attack carried out by the Rapid Support Forces last April on the Zamzam displacement camp in North Darfur State. In a statement published Thursday, the UN office said the RSF committed massacres, rape, other forms of sexual violence, torture, and abductions during the attack carried out between 11 April and 13, which resulted in the killing of more than 1,013 civilians, most of them women and children. The Sudanese army announced that its forces had repelled several violent attacks launched by the Rapid Support Forces in various areas of northern Sudan. Sudanese military sources told Al-24 News on Thursday that the RSF carried out 35 drone attacks at dawn on northern cities, including Atbara, Ad-Damir, and Berber in River Nile State. The sources added that the armed forces remain on full alert and will continue fighting until every inch of the country is liberated. The Sudanese Emergency Lawyers Organization said repeated RSF attacks across the country are crippling vital civilian institutions. In statements to Al-24 News on Thursday, the organization's executive bureau member Mohammed Salah ad-Din said RSF forces directly targeted a power substation in the city of Atbara, which supplies electricity to several states, including the capital, Khartoum.
The Rapid Support Forces resumed attacks using a very large number of drones on civilian sites in the city. The attacks heavily targeted electrical power substations, which led to electricity outages in several Sudanese states. This caused major disruptions to water stations and also affected hospitals, resulting in a very serious crisis. Targeting power substations and electricity has wide repercussions, as they are connected to telecommunications networks, water facilities, and many other essential services. As a result, there was a kind of collective punishment of Sudanese civilians due to this targeting, which involved extremely severe and excessive strikes.
The UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, warned of rising displacement in Sudan as thousands of families continue to flee intense fighting across the Kordofan region. In press remarks on Thursday, UN Deputy Spokesperson Farhan Haq said the estimates by the International Organization for Migration indicate 9.3 million displaced people across Sudan's 18 states, more than half of them children.
Yesterday, local authorities in White Nile reported that some 1,600 people, the vast majority of them women and children, arrived in the city of Kosti. Many endured journeys lasting over a week, often through South Sudan, and showed clear signs of trauma. While our humanitarian partners are providing them with basic shelter, health, water, sanitation, food, and protection assistance, needs are outstripping available resources.
And at least 12 people were killed and others injured when gunmen attacked a mining site in the village of Atusu Plateau State in central Nigeria. The assault also left 3 people abducted and 5 wounded. The region has long been plagued by armed violence, which has killed tens of thousands and displaced millions across Nigeria. And in other news, Algeria has called for reform of the United Nations counter-terrorism framework, putting forward key recommendations for the future of the system. Speaking on Wednesday before the UN Security Council, Algeria's permanent representative Ammar Ben Jama, in his capacity related to Algeria's chairmanship of 3 Security Council subsidiary bodies, presented core recommendations for strengthening the UN counter-terrorism architecture. He highlighted the main achievements made under Algeria's leadership.
I must begin by highlighting a procedural matter that deeply affected the effectiveness of all committees. It was the chair appointment for 2025, who were only made on the 29th of May this year. Operational consequences were significant, undermining strategic planning and early engagement with member states, hindering implementation of resolutions mandates, difficult prioritization decision under severe time constraint, and also scheduling conflicts between subsidiary bodies meeting and Security Council activities.
In the same context and on procedural reforms, Ben Jama said Algeria made significant progress in ensuring equal access for all Security Council members, especially elected ones, to subsidiary body documents, and introduced guidelines to curb terrorist financing through modern technologies. Let's have a listen.
The Algeria Guiding Principles on Preventing Terrorism Financing Through New Technology, now representing a framework for addressing how terrorists exploit emerging financial technologies. These principles, I mean the Algeria Guiding Principles, are a testament to the committee collective efforts and consensus-driven cooperation.
Jama urged the Council to address resource imbalances, noting that Africa accounts for 90 or 59% of global terrorism-related debts, but receives only a limited share of counterterrorism resources and assessment visits. Let's have a listen.
Africa now accounts for 59% of global terrorism-related death. Yet, a troubling pattern persists. Assessment visits by the Secretariat and partner do not reflect at all the severity of terrorist threat in Africa. And we regret that the committee was unable to adopt the 2025 list of proposed visits. Algeria has advocated for prioritizing the most affected countries. I mean the Sahel region.
And Algeria's National People's Assembly is set to begin deliberations on a draft law criminalizing colonialism, a bill that seeks to criminalize the French occupation for crimes committed against the Algerian people and state, including repression, arson, genocide, and forced displacement over 132 years. More details with Marwa Belawar.
Algeria's parliament is moving forward with a landmark bill to criminalize French colonialism in Algeria. Backed by documented evidence and legal files, the parliament have opened historic public debates on legislation aimed at holding France accountable for crimes committed during its occupation of Algeria. Those crimes span decades and generations, including mass killings, forced displacement, cultural erasure, and the use of Algerian civilians in nuclear weapons testing. The Algerian legislature's bill seeks to address every legal dimension of colonial violence with the goal of forcing official recognition and repartitions from France.
اليوم هذا المشروع القانون يجرم فرنسا.
Today, this law criminalizes France. It considers France as a state that committed a fully constituted crime of aggression against another state, namely Algeria, a crime that does not lapse with the passage of time. This law will today move from presentation to voting, then to debate, and finally become a legislative text with binding effects.
The parliamentary move comes amid a broader African push to pursue accountability for colonial crimes across the continent. It follows a high-level African conference hosted by Algeria on criminalizing colonialism, an initiative proposed by President Abdelmajid Tebboune at the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa. That proposal calls for documenting, prosecuting, and confronting colonial crimes committed by colonial powers in Africa.
القرائن والمؤشرات للنجاح في هذا المسعى هي كبيرة.
The signs and indicators of success in this endeavor are very strong, especially given the near universal condemnation of old colonialism by almost all countries. The return of this issue to the forefront, led by Algeria, will add significant value toward achieving the goals pursued by African leaders and, above all, the African peoples.
Such crimes of mass deportation, systemic repression, forced illiteracy, and nuclear testing, long denied or minimized, can no longer be ignored. They stress that the memory file is non-negotiable and that time does not erase responsibility for crimes that transcend borders and generations.
The Algerian Minister of State and Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ahmed Attaf, arrived in Cairo to participate in the second ministerial meeting of the Africa-Russia Partnership Forum, scheduled for December 19 to 29, 2025, at the instruction of President Abdelmajid Tebboune. According to a statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs issued Thursday, the meeting will focus in particular on assessing the implementation of the 2023 to 2026 Joint Action Plan, as well as preparations for the Third Africa-Russia Summit, expected to be held next year, with the aim of injecting new momentum into the Africa-Russia partnership. Algerian President Mr. Abdelmajid Tebboune on Thursday afternoon inaugurated the 33rd edition of the Algerian Production Fair at the Exhibition Palace in Algiers. The economic event, held under the slogan "Algeria builds its future," runs until December 27 and features the participation of more than 600 enterprises representing various sectors. In the same context, Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune toured several pavilions at the 33rd Algerian Production Fair at the Exhibition Palace in Pinewood or in Les Pas-Maritimes, Algiers. He visited the Ministry of National Defense Pavilion, receiving briefings on the latest developments in military industries, including combat vehicles, weapons, systems, and drones. At the Pharmaceutical Industry Pavilion, he was briefed on the activities of the LDM Group, including a new factory for hormonal drugs, the fifth of its kind in the world, producing thyroid medication through an Algerian-German partnership. The president also toured the الإتصال Algeria Steel Complex Pavilion, learning about new projects in Garaj Bilad and Bashar, and visited the Ceram Decor Pavilion, which specializes in ceramics and porcelain production. President Tebboune inaugurated the new Palestine Pavilion at the Exhibition Palace in Palmaritime, Algiers, during the opening of the 33rd Algerian Production Fair. He received briefings from SAFEC CEO Karim Bougadoum and attended a presentation by Internal Trade Minister Amel Abdelatif on the performance and participation of Algerian economic operators. At the 33rd Algerian Production Fair, CEO of the Saidal Group highlighted efforts to boost production to meet domestic demand and noted contracts signed for pharmaceutical exports. Meanwhile, the CEO of Sim Algeria, a motorcycle manufacturer, praised government measures supporting local products, saying the company plans to begin exporting in the first quarter of next year while covering domestic needs.
First of all, what reassured us was the issuance of a new investment law. This has greatly and effectively contributed to removing obstacles and restoring investors' confidence in order to drive development and the national economy forward. We are working with great seriousness and determination to supply the national market with all the models produced by SIM. We also have a clear objective to begin exporting in the first half of the year to several countries, including Tunisia.
And on Thursday, the winners of the inaugural President of the Republic Prize for Literature in the Arabic language were honored at the Abdelatif Rahad International Conference Center in Algiers, overseen by Prime Minister Sifi Ghraib. Researcher Sadiq Boutwita won the top prize for promoting the Arabic language with a glossary of satellite terms and definitions, while writer Baba Hannan Nana took first prize in the novel category. For Al-Nidiya, prizes in the localization of knowledge and translation categories were withheld.
My participation in this award was for the first time. It consisted of producing a glossary of satellite-related terminology and definitions translated from English into Arabic and then into French.
Algeria's Supreme Council of the Arabic language honored President Abdelmajid Tebboune on Thursday in recognition of his sustained efforts to promote the Arabic language. The award was received on behalf of President Tebboune by Prime Minister Sifi Ghraib. In a speech on the occasion, the head of the Supreme Council of the Arabic language, Salah Bel'aid, praised the high-level patronage President Tebboune accords to the Arabic language, describing the establishment of this prize as a qualitative gain for national culture that reflects the prominent place of Arabic in state policies. And in other news, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said no peace agreement has yet been reached, with key disputes remaining over contested territories and the future of frozen Russian assets in the West. Speaking in Brussels on Thursday, he acknowledged that negotiations with the U.S. are challenging and expressed hope that Washington will increase pressure on Moscow. US and Russian officials are set to meet in Miami later this week for talks on President Donald Trump's plan to end the war in Ukraine, a White House official told AFP. The talks follow 2 days of meetings in Berlin between Kiev and Trump's envoys, which Zelensky praised, while warning that Moscow is preparing for a new year of war. The U.S. delegation is expected to include Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, with Russia represented by Kirill Dmitriev. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said she expects EU member states to reach an agreement on financing Ukraine during the summit being held in Brussels on Thursday and Friday. Von der Leyen stated that she would not leave the European Council before a solution is found. Several countries, including Belgium, oppose using frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine unless all member states agree to share the financial risk associated with such a move, a position von der Leyen said she supports. And in another development, EU leaders agreed at summit in Brussels on Thursday to explore the possibility of financing Ukraine in 2026 and 2027 by using frozen Russian assets instead of issuing joint EU debt. Out of 210 billion euros in Russian assets frozen within the EU, 185 billion euros are held in Belgium. So Belgian authorities have expressed concern that releasing these funds under an EU plan could expose the country to potential legal retaliation from Moscow. We have reached the end of our program for tonight. Thank you very much for watching and have a great night.